Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Meshar, and I'm your host today for Access to Democracy. And my guest with me today is Benjamin Feist, Legislative Director from the ACLU. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you are doing interesting work with the Minnesota Civil Liberties Union, and I thought it'd be interesting to hear what made you decide to go into law in the first place?
Well, that's an interesting question and a complicated one, I suppose. I went to the University of Minnesota for my undergrad in political science, and I always had an interest in sort of social justice and civil rights issues. After graduating, it made sense for me to go in and try to work directly in politics. So I worked for a while for former Minnesota Representative Martin Sabo's office and also Bill Luther's office in Woodbury for a time.
Interesting experience, I'm sure.
It was. Okay. It was a great experience, and I really enjoyed spending time in politics, but I decided that it was important to have a job that wasn't dependent on the next election. So it also made sense for me then to go to law school, which had been a long time dream of mine. Okay. And I attended William Mitchell in St. Paul. Okay,
so why not corporate law? A lot more lucrative, certainly. What draws you to the ACLU? How did you end up there?
Well, even that is an interesting path, I think. I never was particularly interested in making a lot of money. I was always more interested in being able to help people, especially the less fortunate. So I was more drawn to the areas of legal aid, for example, where I spent some time during law school, and then ultimately went to the Minnesota Attorney General's office out of law school to be an assistant attorney general in the area of consumer protection and complex litigation. Okay. So I found a way to serve the people of Minnesota again, but in a different role.
A different role. Now, I also know immigration, I think, is an area of interest for you as well, is it not?
It is, yes. I had a short stint as an immigration attorney, actually working with my wife, who's an immigration attorney in the Twin Cities at the law firm of Grell and Feist.
Oh, interesting. So immigration has been quite a bit in the news. Obama, of course, has a recent executive order on immigration. Any thoughts or comments about that happening?
Well, we're excited for the potential for some very serious beneficial reforms for immigrants in Minnesota. I think we still have to see how it all plays out and what the implementation of these programs actually are. You know, at the ACLU, we've been working on things like changing ICE detainer practices. And
can you explain for our viewers what is that? So explain, that was going to be one of my questions for you. That's a local event that's happening.
Exactly. It's basically the process where someone would get picked up and held beyond the time that they would in the local jail, for lack of a better term here, for ICE to come over, the immigration enforcement people, to come over and check them out for their status. And sometimes we were seeing abuses of this, and unlawfully so, where there was no need or legal basis to hold people over in these places. We were having to spend public money to keep them there longer, and seeing no direct benefit from doing so.
Ramsey County, based on the work that was done with the ACLU, has changed their policy or started to do things differently. Maybe you can say more about that.
That's right. Yep. Ramsey County, Hennepin County, and a number of others have all come together to say they will not honor ICE holds anymore. So we've made great progress in that area.
Okay. Another interesting thing involving the ACLU is a recent report, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit, highlighting that African Americans in this part of the country were far more likely to have low-level arrests, extremely more likely than the rest of the population. Maybe you could, what can we learn from that report, or what should we understand from that report? Maybe you can share a little more.
Absolutely, and again, I should point out that I focus more on the legislative side of things, but I am also involved in some of these discussions at our office, and it was a really big deal to get this data that showed these racial disparities between essentially white folks and African Americans in Minneapolis. And we're trying to figure out what it means, but I think the short of it is that there are, whether it's underlying biases from the police themselves, or the policies that the departments have enacted, and they're simply acting in the way that asked to, we're seeing results that are not appropriate in our point of view for our American values here in Minnesota.
So this was kind of a groundbreaking report because it gives some factual information to back up what people have been observing anecdotally for a long time.
Exactly. We have definitely known that there was a problem, but it's when you can actually put the hard data out there that people really stand up and take notice. And so we've already had some productive conversations. This Minneapolis City Council and the chief have all been responsive to these concerns, and we hope to see something happen in the near future.
Some changes go on. Okay. You mentioned you're involved in the legislative aspect, so say more about what you do there and what your interests are in terms of your job with the legislature.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the primary lobbyist for the ACLU of Minnesota, and that involves both having a proactive agenda, the items that we hope to see pass in each session, and also a sort of a defensive agenda, making sure that civil liberties aren't being violated with new statutes.
So what's your proactive agenda?
So heading into the session, starting in January, we have a pretty aggressive agenda set up, all really based on continuing the work that we've been doing the last couple of years. And I would break that down into, I suppose, three categories. The first one is trying to do further reforms to the civil asset forfeiture process. That's a complicated one that I can get into detail in a little bit if we want. But also, and maybe a more timely issue, privacy issues with surveillance that's happening by law enforcement in Minnesota. There's a lot happening in this area, including automatic license plate readers, drone surveillance, and others.
So say more about that. So this concerns our viewers. This concerns each of us. How is that going to impact us, and what bills should we watch for? What support should we provide? Say more about what's going on there.
Sure. Yeah. So last session we actually had we supported a handful of bills in this area. We had a cell phone tracking bill first, and the idea behind that bill was that there was no requirement in Minnesota law that law enforcement needed to get a warrant to track where your cell phone is at any time. And with the fact that a lot of us at least, carry cell phones that are GPS enabled on us at all times, this allows law enforcement to know where we are at all times, in places that we normally have high expectations of privacy sometimes. So we were able, after negotiations with law enforcement, to get a bill passed and signed into law that now requires a warrant and some transparency as well. There will be reporting requirements on how often these warrants are requested from the court. Notice will be provided if the department needs to track where the cell phone is and that sort of thing. So building off of that, we hope to have a similar type of requirement for drones. If law enforcement or other government entities decide to start using these drones, we know the technology exists. It's becoming less and less like science fiction and more something we expect to see on a government and private business and a hobbyist standpoint. So we're hoping this session that the legislature acts to pass a drones bill that would restrict the uses by law enforcement and again provide a certain level of transparency that certain departments are acquiring these and what they're being used for.
Excellent, very nice. Speaking about a little bit with the previous topic about certain minority groups being more likely to be arrested, I'm thinking also of the protest tomorrow and who's likely to be arrested at the Mall of America. There's a big protest going on for what has happened in Ferguson and elsewhere in the country. And the Mall of America, of course, is claiming that they are private property and people don't have a right to protest there. They can protest at another area that they're going to designate. What is the ACLU thinking, or what are the thoughts with regard to peaceful protest?
Well, obviously we're big supporters of the right to have peaceful protests, but we do acknowledge when there are limitations on that. I personally don't know the exact legality of the mall's argument here. But there are a lot of privacy implications that come into play on that I'll bring up because I think that's very interesting. You know, the Mall of America has a lot of these license plate readers installed.
Yes.
It's come to light that they have a number of these, and the license plate reader technology is really very interesting because it takes a picture of every license plate that passes by and gives it a GPS date and time stamp. And it can be used for a private company in a lot of different ways. In the government's hands, they tend to use them to find out immediately in a squad car if the car that they just passed has a driver, there's a warrant out for their arrest, or the car was stolen. And those are really appropriate uses, but they compile and retain this data currently on innocent people, the non-hits, as we call them. And in the same way, the Mall of America would have this information about everyone's comings and goings into the mall. And in terms of a protest, you might be chilling speech by knowing that they have some log of everyone who's come into the mall. In addition to that, we now have police-worn body cameras popping up all over the place. And we have concerns that while this tool can be very helpful in police accountability and ultimately might give us some more trust in our peace officers, that it could also chill speech a little bit in that context because people would know that they're being surveilled at all times. So before we see widespread implementation of body cameras, we believe we need some very serious privacy protections in place.
And also we've had body cameras now on some police, and it hasn't been overly helpful. Think of Eric Garner in New York, and think of the 12-year-old boy in Cleveland. So we had camera surveillance in both of those situations, and different outcomes in each of them in terms of indictments, but in investigation. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's a really good discussion piece to have around the body camera issue, because really after the events of Ferguson, there was a national interest in getting body cameras rolled out right away.
Yes.
And a belief that with all the uncertainty of the facts of that case, the public and the folks involved would have a much clearer idea of what happened and be able to get an indictment, so that we don't have that type of excessive force potentially used again.
Or limit the use of excessive force in the first place, but
Exactly. And then, of course, we have the Eric Garner situation where it was fully caught on camera, and yet there was no indictment, even though a lot of people would say that that was really an egregious police action.
right.
So I think what it comes down to is that the reality of body cameras is somewhere in between. It's not the silver bullet.
It's not the panacea we think it might be.
No, it definitely isn't. And there are a lot of concerns out there with its use, but it really should be a tool that can be available to us to address some of these issues.
Maybe used in a certain way, judicious way, I want to say. Recently, too, the ACLU Minnesota filed a suit to protect the right of free speech for a nursing student. Maybe you can share more about what happened with that suit.
Again, I have less information about that than I do with the issues that are happening at the legislature, but it is a really interesting case there. My understanding of the facts, we had some postings on social media outside the context of the actual program that the student was involved in. But
And this is an adult student. This
yes.
is not an underage, not a minor. Right?
Exactly. And yet these postings were a reason to get this person kicked out of the school and out of the program. So we have serious concerns about that, and it's a fairly detailed issue, but we submitted an amicus brief in that case recently.
So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward and what is decided there, because social media is so prevalent everywhere, and especially for adults, the implications if you're a professional person and you're going to be restricted by your company you're working for and so forth of kind of topics that you can discuss on social media. It will be interesting to see how that gets decided.
Yeah, there are very serious speech implications with the new world of social media, and I think the issues are going to keep coming at us. But we have to realize it's a new world. We have to protect this speech, but at the same time, people have to understand that when they say things on social media, they are out there in the world.
You can't take it back.
You can't take it back most of the time, at least, and it's sort of saved forever.
Yeah.
So we need to take this stuff very seriously.
So tell me, going forward in the legislature, what's the most exciting topic coming up for you in the next session after the new year?
Oh, there's so many. Just this morning I was at a great meeting of the Restore the Vote Coalition. So I'll talk about that one. I think that's worth talking about. We're involved in a really large coalition of interested groups, including other socially interested groups, but other communities, faith communities, and even government folks, some county attorneys and corrections people, who are all interested in this idea that there are around 47,000 Minnesotans who currently are not able to vote, but they are living in the community, typically on probation or parole. And they're excluded from the process and the ability to participate in our democracy. So there's tons of reason to believe that studies have shown that if you're actively engaged and able to vote, you will be better integrated into society and have a more positive experience with that.
You have a stake in your community, in other words.
Exactly. And children are more likely to vote if they see their parents vote. So we have issues there. Due to the disparities in the criminal justice system, we see a disparity in the proportion of African Americans who are disenfranchised in Minnesota. So there's a racial element. And then there's a basic element of how complicated the system is that people don't understand when they can and can't vote. So that causes a problem for administration and potential action that would need to be taken against someone who just didn't know.
Yes. it was interesting, it came to light for people, I think, to realize in Ferguson, for example, that a lot of low-level ticketing goes on with certain minority populations in some communities. Maybe things really minor, your trash can is not brought in at the proper time, or you have a cracked window, so violation, which are kept on file, so that should later, at a later date, they want to be able to more easily arrest somebody on a low-level violation. That becomes a way to do it. And again, it's a way to limit who has maybe access to the system to vote, or who maybe can be disenfranchised and not have as much stake in their community. I don't know, maybe you can say more about that.
Yeah, that's something that we have big concerns with. This idea of the broken windows policing, I think, is the concept that you're describing. You know, that's been used in Minnesota for a while now, and we see these disparities just growing and growing. So I think it's time that we have a really fundamental change in what we're asking our police officers to do, because ultimately I think they are doing a good job of following the directives and doing what they're asked to do. And so at this point, I think we need to have a serious look at whether this is working or if it's just eroding the public trust. And we have the possibility that you know, a community like North Minneapolis could become the next Ferguson.
Yeah, which wouldn't help. The other thing too, I noticed for the Mall of America tomorrow, they got a lot of tax money, public tax rebate, in order to build that new addition and in order to have the original mall. So they're private in a sense, but in another sense, they're using public funding. So interesting too, that money, $250 million, was originally earmarked for poor communities in Minneapolis and was moved to tax breaks for the Mall of America. So I don't know if that will come to light as that understanding moves forward, or people become more aware of that. But that's all part of the complexity of what's public, what's private, how much, to what degree, so forth. It's interesting. I have a couple quick questions because we just have a few minutes left, but I know that you are from Minnesota, so you grew up in Monona, I believe, or went to school there.
I was born there,
Yep. And have lived in the St. Paul area. So what do you like to do in your spare time when you're not at the state legislature? You're not working to get some new bills passed or other bills not passed?
Well, yeah, I can tell you it's definitely not my hobby to hang out at the Capitol. I do enough of that for my paid job. You know, I have two young children, ages 4 and 3, so they keep me pretty busy.
I bet. Yeah.
But also a big Twins fan. So we try to get to as many baseball games as we can, and try to check out a lot of the concerts that come to town.
Nice.
And you know, that sort of stuff. So I have a good work-life balance.
Very good. Any traveling that you get to do due to your job at all?
Not too often. Again, it's usually back and forth to the state capitol.
Okay.
But every once in a while there's an opportunity. You know, interestingly, we recently had a national ACLU expert on drones come in to testify on our behalf, and so I feel like the folks in DC get to come and see Minnesota.
Oh, nice.
Or in New York, get to come in and visit us, and we've been able to show them around the Twin Cities, and they've been able to come in and better inform our legislature and get the process going there. So, you know, it would be kind of neat if I could go the other way. I'd be happy to travel, but for the most part,
maybe it's more important that they get outside the Beltway and come here. So.
Well, exactly. And we're an affiliate organization of the National ACLU, so there's an interest in seeing what is happening in each of the states. And as we get some of these great results, like we recently got a criminal conviction requirement for civil asset forfeiture cases. So previously you could be acquitted of a crime and still lose your property through a civil process. And that was just an egregious issue in the law. And this is happening all over the country. We've seen articles in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even John Oliver on his HBO show has done a segment on the civil asset forfeiture issue. But Minnesota is now really ahead of the curve on that.
Nice, very nice.
So they're happy to hear about what we're doing and to show that Minnesota is a place where we can be pioneers on these issues and set some really
Excellent.
strong precedent.
Real quickly for our viewers, which bills would we want to watch for in the new session not to pass? What should we watch for?
You know, I'm currently not aware of any particularly scary bills that would threaten civil liberties.
Okay.
I'm certain that they will pop up, but so far none of the opposing organizations have come to me to give me a heads up that they're on the way. So unfortunately, I don't have a strong sense of what those are. I just know that we'll be there to fight them when they arise.
All right. And real quickly, as we have a few minutes left here, tortfeasor. Who is tortfeasor?
So you're reading my bio. Yes. Tortfeasor is my tortoise.
Okay.
He's a sulcata African land tortoise.
How big?
Currently about this big.
So big.
A little bigger than a football.
Okay.
But it's the second largest land tortoise breed, and will live over 100 years and could be upwards of 200 pounds one day.
Oh my goodness. So how did the name arise, tortfeasor? Where's that coming
Well,
from?
tortfeasor is a civil wrongdoer, and it's a bad law school joke, ultimately. My wife and I were dating in law school when we decided to invest in a pet that would outlive us for some reason. It was really cute. It was only about this big, fit in the palm of your hand at that time.
So he's grown since you've had him.
So he's grown significantly over the past 7 or 8 years that we've had him. And
does he move freely in your house, or is he in a little...
Oh, we had to build him a very specific pen in the basement to accommodate his heat lamp needs and take good care of him.
And what about your kids? They accept him as one of the family living there?
Yeah, they've always known him, and we hope that one day they will inherit.
Oh, they'll inherit him.
Yep.
So that when he outlives you.
Exactly. Yeah, he's likely to. So it'd be nice to know that he has a happy home to stay in when he's huge.
Very good. Well, we're just about winding down, but it's just been very nice to have you on the show with us today, and I do hope you'll be able to come back and join us. There are a lot more topics and things that are going on that it'd be fun to explore a little further and learn more about. But I didn't even get to touch a few things which we can think about. So we didn't even get to the torture report that came out and what's going on there. Any quick thoughts for us before we close on that?
Well, that's a complicated one.
Yeah.
What I think I can say in the brief time we have here is simply to make sure to go to ACLU.org to get all the updated information. The national organization puts out new information, documents, reports almost every day. And at ACLU-MN.org, you get the state-based work that we're doing. We're also on Twitter and Facebook, and there are a lot of ways to interact with the ACLU.
Excellent.
So
And
please
that's
do.
good because there are excellent summaries there. They do give pretty balanced overview in terms of their understanding of the law, what's problematic, why they're working for certain things. People can get educated very quickly, and it's not too lengthy. They do it in pretty succinct sections on the website when you go there, so that's a good point. That's it. I think we're done. Thank you so much. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.